for adolescents, their educators can be inspiring role models who can play a pivotal role in positively diversifying and defining their adolescent period by educating and equipping them with academics and life skills. We need to begin by being gender responsive and move to make the educational spaces gender transformative so that the educational journey are empowering for the girls. Sohini Bhattacharya is an intrapreneur with over 30 years of experience in the development sector. Currently, she is a CEO at Breakthrough, an organization working in India to transform gender norms that perpetuate violence against women, using multimedia, leadership development and community mobilization. Before joining Breakthrough, Sohini had spent 10 years at Ashoka Innovators for the public and international organization, building an ecosystem for social entrepreneurs. She also served as the president of Breakthrough USA from 2017 till 2020 to manage the crucial founder transition and stabilize the organization. Hi, I'm Purnima and I'm going to be your host for the show Heads Together, a fireside chat by Room to Read. And today I'm joined by Ms. Sohini Bhattacharya, the CEO of Breakthrough. Hi Sohini, thank you for joining us today.
Hello Purnima, thank you for having me for this episode of your Fireside Chats.
So Sohini, let me just start with asking you a few questions. How do you think we can make the educational journey for adolescent girls empowering?
Purnima, I'd like to begin a little, I'll take a few back steps to talk about a few concepts. One is the concept of gender equity. You know, equity means fairness and could be fairness in anything. When it comes to gender, it means that you have to be fair to socially and historically marginalized identities. Men, women, boys and girls, all other genders, you know. And so you have to create a level playing field for all genders. That's the first thing about equity, and this kind of equity focus actually brings us to gender equality. Gender equality is actually a fair sense of enjoyment of socially added values, resources, opportunities, rights by everybody. And by that I mean women, men, girls, boys, transgender, all other gendered identities. Now, if we want to create a gender equal world, where can we begin from? I think the school system and the education system is the best place to begin with, because you get adolescent girls and boys, and you know, girls and boys of all ages at that place in large numbers. Education and schools have a great influence in your life, and also education and people who are associated with education are looked at as influencers or role models in society. So whatever they say sometimes is listened to. Now, how do we make this education system gender responsive, and as you said, gender transformative? Responsive is one step, you know, transformative is a step ahead. So when it comes to gender responsive education system, we look at it as having equal outcomes for all genders through that education system. But it doesn't begin to address the deeper gender inequalities within the system.
So true, yeah.
When it comes to gender transformative education system, you are then looking at all components of education, from the pedagogy to the community engagement, to the teachers themselves, and to the entire environment of the school system.
Right.
It's really it's kind of a resetting the approach to education, you know. And I think we sometimes call it the whole school system, where we connect, you know, pedagogy to teachers to, you know, the community engagement. When we look at education like that, then education really has the power to change the gender norms, you know, the norms and behaviors, as well as the whole patriarchal mindset of people that are so deeply entrenched in our culture. So it begins to change the culture, it begins to show what is possible, and the communities also can then follow and do, you know, take up that kind of behavior. So I think it's time that we all think about a gender transformative education system and what that can mean for adolescents.
Yeah, that is so true, and that brings me to my next question, that what are the different spaces and stakeholders that you have to be onboarded, and what are the strands of engagement with them, how we could really make this as a gender transformative world for both boys and girls?
So I think we'll have to begin from the top as well as start working from the bottom. For a system to be gender transformative, you have to start with policies and policymakers.
Yeah.
Are they prioritizing gender in policies?
Yeah.
Even in the way they're allocating budget towards, bringing in the gender lens into the classroom. What are the kind of priorities the government is talking about? And I'm not just talking about services like giving cycles to girls, which is important, or having lockable toilets in schools, which is very important from an adolescent girl's point of view, or vending machines for sanitary napkins, very, very important. But at the same time, is the whole system prioritizing education? Is it looking at prioritizing gender, sorry. Is it looking at gender as a key component within the education system, and not just as a separate kind of a lens? Second thing that I'll talk about is really to transform pedagogies. So even now in our country, I believe we have curriculums which talk about women's roles in households, or have pictures even for young boys and girls, pictures of the mom staying at home or cooking a meal or doing a housework, and the father who is going out to work. This inevitably creates a difference in the mind of the child, who's to put certain amount of values in the work of men, women, and other genders. You do not also, the points of inequalities are created through the pedagogy. How many disabled boys and girls and other people from other gender do you see in your school, books?
Yeah.
How many people from, how many times do you talk about people who are sexual minorities? How many times do you talk about LGBTQI plus people, or even transgender people through the curriculum?
Yeah.
And, even the basic level, do we talk about how young girls or boys are equal? At a very, very basic level, are boys and girls and all genders equal? Does this come through our curriculum pedagogy? And the pedagogy is important for the adolescents, but the pedagogy is also important for teachers.
Yeah.
What does the teacher's curriculum look like? I know, gender is a part of the teacher training curriculum, but has that been reviewed? Has that been systematically reviewed every year to see what are the new components we can add to that? So pedagogy all over. The third thing that I would like to bring here is the school environment. Very often we hear about school environment, and when I'm talking about school environment, I'm not talking about within the four boundaries, but also the road to the school.
Yeah.
We often hear of sexual harassment that young girls face when they're on their way to school.
Yes.
We hear of bullying that boys, boys who are not traditionally masculine, face within school system. So how can we make the school environment much more safer for everybody? This also includes child safeguarding. This also includes tying up with organizations who can provide counseling services, or like a child line who can provide other kind of services. So is the school environment safe? The fourth thing is a stakeholder engagement. Are we talking to different stakeholders? And this means that not just the school leaders or the school teachers, are we talking to the, the administrative staff, the education officers, the BEOs, DEOs, the CRCs, the master trainers. There's a huge environment out there, a huge community out there who are as responsible for creating a gender transformative system within the schools as the teachers and the principals are. So how are we talking about them? And last but not the least, I'm going to talk about community engagement. And you do not have to go far, but if you can just focus on the parental engagement. Parents do not prioritize education for girls. And we can see that from the, the disproportionate value that's placed on boys' education.
Yeah.
For, if you have limited resources, you'll prioritize a boys' education. The forced and the early marriages that girls go through, or the amount of housework, young girls are made to do.
Yeah.
So there is no value for education in a girl's life. And so parents do not want to kind of engage with the school saying, there's no, it's not going to be of any value, my engaging with the school system, because the girl is going to go to somebody else's house, she's going to get married, she's not my responsibility. How can we break those things? How can we make sure that girls are valued, and then girls' education is valued? And it's like a loop. If girls' education is going to be valued, then girls are going to be valued, and vice versa. So these are the 4-5 things that we must look for within the system, and we must, if we can transform even 3 out of 5, we are doing we take a huge step towards making our school systems gender transformative.
Yeah, so very well said. And in fact, the way you spoke about the role of the policy makers, the policy stakeholders, that really interests me. And if we could just talk a little bit more from what are your views on the Gender Inclusion Fund of the NEP? Do you think that can help prioritize if our aim is to create gender equality through education?
I want to first say that it's a huge step. It's a big step towards the right direction. This is, maybe for the first time we found the word gender within an education policy in such a prominent way. And I think we need to now see how we can actually use this to our advantage.
Yeah.
What would be interesting to see is a roadmap created within that, and also to see how the word gender and how the concept of gender is infused through everything that the education policy says, and not just about a gender inclusion fund.
Yeah.
Because when we were talking right at the beginning, I said that for systems to really change and become more gender sensitive or gender transformative or gender responsive, you cannot create verticals within that. Gender has to cut through every vertical, everything that you're looking at, from teacher training to pedagogy to community engagement, everything it must look through. So one of the things that we have seen which can be leveraged within the NEP is to really prioritize and have a focus on the dropout rates. And we all know that as girls transition from primary to secondary and higher secondary, the dropout rates increase. We've got almost 95% of enrollment at a primary level. But as it goes up, girls drop through the crack, girls drop out of the system. But this is not being captured. How can we capture that? How can we bring this to the notice of the policymakers every year, saying, look, this is what happened this year. And look, this can happen if you make the system more gender transformative. So show them, a kind of a before and after kind of thing. How can we do that? How we can make sure that girls have at least a few very gender positive interactions within school. I came from a very middle class school, but a school which is very famous for its education system. But even then, all science and STEM subjects were taught to a meritorious, creamy layer of the school, and mostly to the boys and not to the girls. We had misogynistic teachers who, when a girl would answer, will say, "Thank you, Rahul," which was a boy's name. This was, and we didn't find it, we thought it was a quirky, we laughed about it, we didn't think it was objectionable. Now you'd find that objectionable, So how many times a teacher asks a question towards a girl? How many times she recognizes that she is answering correctly? How many times a girl is having a positive environment? If a girl continues to have a positive interaction at school level, she will not leave school, or she will make sure that she negotiates with her parents not to take her out of school. So that's an opportunity that NEP gives us. The second opportunity that NEP gives us is the whole teacher training system. Teachers are one of the most, overworked components of our society. Like the Anganwadi workers, the teachers, for everything, you turn to a teacher, from poll duties to COVID duties to,
election duties.
Election duties, everything, the teacher is your go-to person. And because of that, the teacher also gets into an inertia of creating any changes within the system. Also, please remember, the large part of our teachers are female. And they all come from the same patriarchal background that the students are coming from. So they're steeped in the same norms and practices and attitudes and beliefs that the students are coming from. How can we create a change within that? How can we look at teachers being aware, maybe a test that they can take themselves on how self-aware they are about gender inequalities, or how do they, a learning material on how to bring gender equitable behavior into the classroom. If you do that, then you would see that teachers' interactions with girls, with boys in a much more gender equitable way is changing over a period of time. The third thing I would like to say is the review of the curriculum. We spoke about pedagogy and how can we bring the gender lens into the curriculum. So we at Breakthrough work with a gender equity curriculum called Taro Ki Toli, which teaches different life skills to classes 6 to 8. Now, we had approached the Punjab government with this program, saying, can we scale this program up in government schools? The government was very interested in co-creating and bringing in a gender lens into the mainstream curriculum. And we thought that is fantastic, because a standalone curriculum, how long will the teachers be interested? But if you can bring in a gender lens into the curriculum itself, then, it is so much better. So we actually reworked curriculums of classes 6, 7 and 8 in 3 subjects, in moral science, social science and English, and brought in the gender lens into the curriculum. Can we do that for everybody? Can we do that for all state governments? And the other point is that the policies are fragmented. Education as well is on the concurrent list, right? So there could be a central directive, but states do whatever they want to do. So how can we look at then, state by state, how can we look at the school management systems? How can we look at, from the principal secretary downwards, can we get them to prioritize gender in the work that they're doing in schools? Can we talk to, the BEOs, the DOs, the CRCs, the master trainers? Can we rejig their thinking in a way to be more gender transformative? And, the last thing, which is probably included in some way within the NEP also, is this whole thing about community and parental engagement in the school. I know there's been talk around SMCs and, PTMs and all of that. What stops us from creating a better communication, vehicle between the parent and the teacher? Right now, we've been talking to some parents, and they said that, why should I go to school? Daant khane ke liye jana padta hai school mein. The teachers tell us, ye nahi kiya hai, wo nahi kiya hai, your child didn't do this, your child didn't do that. So that's the only kind of interaction. Can we have interactions there which are more meaningful? And through those interactions, can we give simple messages? Messages like, how education is important for both, all of genders. How we can actually make sure that your girl is not overpowered with, all the work that she has to do at home, so that she doesn't have any time to actually study. Or how can we make sure that marriage is not the only thing that you want, that is the, ambition for your girl. So how can we, through simple messages, and when teachers talk, parents listen, so how can we create that kind of a healthy dialogue between the two would be something that then we can really, focus on and leverage.
Absolutely. Educators play a very important role, I would say. And, just to add very interesting points and suggestions that you made. But just to add, I personally think that, there has to be something like a gender mainstreaming reform as part of the national education policy, the way the government is looking at the FLN mission. And, so we have to have reforms like these to be able to make changes at the curriculum level, at a pedagogy level, at a teachers and the community level. So that's like a larger reform that we need to do. I mean, very important points that you made. This brings me to another question, which is, what can the different components of gender transformational approach to education? What are your suggestions on that?
I think one of the things that we have to do is, let's focus on interacting with the school administrative, staff. Let's look at, from the principal secretary downwards, let's start looking at how can we make those interactions more gender equitable, bring in a lens of gender, like you said, gender mainstreaming.
Yeah.
Let's bring in a lens of gender in their outlook, so that when you call principals to a session and you talk about what is going to be the next discussion point at your school level meeting or your parent teacher meeting, why can't we in one of those sessions talk about girls forced an early marriage and how that is not really doing any benefit to bringing any benefit to the girl. So how can we talk about those kind of things, and that will come only if they look at their own gender biases, they realize there's a need for a transformation, and then they look at that. So something like that. Also, if you want to actually link education to, let's say, job opportunities, or education to skilling, or education to vocational, where is that information coming to the girls and the boys and all other genders at a very young age? People have to. So in the absence of that, girls also think that marriage is the be all and end all. Especially in poor, marginalized, disadvantaged backgrounds in schools and parents and communities, they think marriage is the only thing that a girl can opt for. But we are not, giving them that information. There are so many schemes, so many, policies that are coming on board. How can we create career as an aspiration for girls from a very young age? Let's bring that into the school system. Let's make sure the teachers understand that, and they create a fun atmosphere talking about, all of those things. And the other thing that would be very, very important is to create a safe school environment where girls feel valued, girls feel safe, where there is conversation about all genders. And the last, and I think this is very important to do but very difficult, and though the NEP talks about trans people and trans women, I don't think they talk at all about LGBTQI population. And there is increasing bullying. You hear of incidents like the incident that just happened in Delhi where this boy took his own life. You hear about this kind of things all the time. Can we focus on talking about sexual minorities, other genders, even within the school system? Teachers should know how to deal with this.
Absolutely.
Students should know how to deal with that. So these are 3-4 things that we need to kind of do in order to make the system more gender transformative.
Yeah.
And the curriculum and the pedagogy is something that we have to change.
Yeah.
It's been years.
I know. So this is like almost a gender integration one has to do, wherein reviewing the policies, really figuring out that where the gaps are, and that assessment has to definitely happen. And do you think, Sohini, that COVID also played its part on widening this gap? What are your thoughts on that?
It did. We've had one of the longest school closures. We know that many, especially adolescent girls, have fallen out of the system because of financial situations of their families. So, we had a 5-year adolescent empowerment program we were running in UP across 7 districts. And we did a pre-end line somewhere in 2020, January 2020. And we saw fantastic results, girls pushing back against marriage, girls demanding more leisure time, how important that is, girls' mobility, girls understanding, and girls talking to parents about not wanting to get married, which in Indian, communities is huge. You don't talk about that. Now, that was a pre-end line. We did the end line in March 2021. And there was a reset. There was things had regressed, where we saw, and adolescents themselves told us that we understand that parents want to get us married because their financial situation is not good. And it broke our hearts. We worked so many years to come to this.
Syndrome.
We brought it here, and then, adolescents themselves are saying that we understand that parents are going through a hardship. So I think, we have to make sure girls go back to school. There is no ifs and buts about that.
Yeah.
We have to make sure girls go back to school. And this whole thing about online teaching, and if you want to really make that as part, NEP mentions online and digital over and over again, but how are we going to give this to poor communities? Can we create low-cost, modules where we can get online training back to girls? Can we think about giving, scholarships in forms of talk time on phones?
Yeah.
Can we make, cheap phones available to girls?
Sure.
And also the culture that needs to change with it, because mobile phone in girls' hands are not looked at as something which is very good.
Yeah, yeah.
I want to mention one more point here, Purnima, is that the need to work with men and boys. Because, girls are survivors of patriarchal norms and practices, but so are boys,
Yeah.
and other genders, because boys grow up thinking, I have to be the head of the family, I have so
Absolutely.
much responsibility, so there's this whole strong sense of pressure, and then they grow up with this confirmed sense of masculinity, that I have to be something like this to
Yeah.
become a man, and that's why they resort to violence, the whole thing kind of. So as much as we need to talk to our girls, we need to talk to our boys as well.
Absolutely. I can't agree more on that. Thank you so much, Sohini, for really raising some important questions and really making some important suggestions today. It's been really, really wonderful talking to you. And some of the points that you really made, which is, how the stakeholders need to be really owning up, the kind of reforms that we need, the accountability that both parents and the teachers need to really own up in terms of really making a gender neutral world. And again, talking about all genders and how girls need to be really given the opportunity. So I think very important points that you raised with us, and this is rightly said, that we need to actually move our educational spaces to be gender transformative, to make this journey, this educational journey, empowering for the girls. And for this, it's just not me and Sohini coming together, but I think it's the organization, the like-minded organization like ours, to come together and work for the cause. Thank you so much.